Believe me, you are not going to want to miss this one. Just be warned, the humor is going to be a bit spicier than usual. If that's not your thing, turn back now. But once you see what's wrong with this figure, you'll totally understand why. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. Today we're taking a look at the DC Multiverse Reign of the Supermen Steel. Starting off with the packaging, and there's nothing particularly noteworthy about the box from this angle, though I will say it's wonderful to finally see Steel's name staring back at me. It's when we get to the side of the box that I do have a minor issue. Specifically that this is named as being from Reign of the Supermen. Why is that a problem? Well, for one thing, this artwork isn't from Reign of the Supermen, but more importantly, neither is the figure inside the package. That, however, is a conversation for presentation. What's interesting is, unlike usual, the picture on their DC Universe Infinite graphic is different than the one on the box, though we can see that one peeking underneath. I'm fascinated by that because that much effort doesn't usually go into this section. If I could just draw your attention to the logo for a second, you'll see that in terms of shape it does better match the box, so I get why they use this artwork, and the artwork itself is fine. So fine that for packaging I'm giving Steel 5 points. Moving on to presentation, and Steel is one of my favorite things to come out of the death and return of Superman storyline. John Henry Irons was an engineer whose life was saved by Superman at a construction site, so when Superman died at the hands of Doomsday, he made himself an Iron Man-like suit to take up the mantle. Years later, and he remains an important member of Superman's supporting cast, and McFarlane's done a pretty good job on this figure. While there are McFarlane'izations like the extra details and the shoulder pads, the face is absolutely perfect, right down to the rivets running alongside the crown of his head. There's also a bit of extra paint to bring out the highlights of the face. Looking at the original comic book art, we can see that the S is supposed to be more angular, metal, and also have rivets, but based on its own merit, this is still pretty striking and does stand out, as does the extra paint detailing on things like his gauntlet. That gauntlet was also taken straight out of the comic. In the comic, he's more of a bluish steel with some silver highlights. The figure is more of a marbleized gray with some blue dry brushing. This honestly creates a very interesting effect, though if I'm being honest, I would have rather they approached it more like Atomic Skull with just straight up metallic colors. I also wish he was a bit wider and bulkier. In the comic you can see he's very broad and stocky, whereas the figure's a bit on the gangly side. Additionally, he's missing the coils running down the sides of his leg. The cape is plastic and very vibrant, and despite not being fabric, is still very light and flexible. Overall, this figure's a mix of choices that I really like and some that I think could have been improved on, but I do feel like there was a lot of attention paid to it. And with all that glowing, you know that means that there's another shoe about to fall. Part of presentation is quality control, and unfortunately mine has a pretty embarrassing issue. How on earth did this pass quality control? Was he painted in a factory, or did he fall asleep at a frat party? Even though there are some choices about this figure I don't love, overall I do like it, but this is the only thing standing out at me. No pun intended. And I promise for the rest of this video, it's the only thing you're gonna notice either. On his own, I probably would have given this figure 4 out of 5, but thanks to quality control and John Henry's iron, for presentation I'm giving Steel 3 points. Moving on to posability, and no funny surprises here. For on the top, and Steel can look up this high, this far down, really great tilt, and all the way around. Moving on down, and this shoulder pad is a little bit flexible, leastways he can raise his arm 9 degrees. He's got that roly-poly rotator cuff, bicep swivel, double jointed elbow with the deep bend, and wrist balls that can swivel and hinge in any direction. Shifting to the torso, and Steel has you're staring. Here, is that better? Ahem. He has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell waist. He can arch back this far, and he can't hunch forward at all. He does, however, get a pretty good amount of tilt, and of course twist. Below the hammer, and Steel has the typical McFarlane hips, only about a 45-degree kick this time around, and he also doesn't have the deepest split, but the twist is really good. Moving on down the leg, and he's got double jointed knees, and toe articulation. Because of the boot, he can't get a complete swivel, but then again, neither do people, so that's fine. At the very least, though, they can hinge and pivot, but not as much. It is a suit of armor, so I feel like if he's a little bit clunky, that's okay. And for posability, I'm giving Steel 4 points. Moving on to playability, and unfortunately, this package wasn't exactly packin'. Naturally, Steel has a trading card and a figure stand. It's got a pretty thorough bio, and if you'd like to read it, pause here. Otherwise, the only thing Steel comes with is his famous hammer. Since he only has one accessory holding hand, he can only grip it with the right, but he can at least cradle it in the left. As such, you don't really get as many posing options with it as I would have liked. Similar to the body, it has that blue paint detail throughout. The issue that I and other collectors are having is that they used a very flexible plastic for the handle. As such, it's just kinda limp and flaccid. I have seen where some collectors have swapped the handle out for Tim Drake's staff. It's just a lot harder and better at maintaining its structure. Otherwise, of course, some hand options would have been appreciated, as well as some rocket boosters for his feet. That said, if you have Batman or Batwoman Beyond, you can use theirs. With so much new sculpting, I understand there probably wasn't a whole lot left in the budget, and that's to say nothing of all the extra paint. Clearly they used a lot. But playability is more than accessories or innuendo. It's also about how well your figure plays with others. Starting with the other Steels in my collection, and here we have a couple from the 1995 Man of Steel series by Kenner. It's interesting because if you take a look at this one, it's a much closer match to the design and color scheme that they used for the artwork on the box. And then we have a Shaquille O'Neal one from the infamous movie. For my only other DC Multiverse substitute Superman from the Reign of Superman story, and here we have Superboy. Seeing them side by side, you can really appreciate just how close they are to being right, but also so far. Otherwise, regarding the Superman family, and here we have Essentials and McFarlane versions of Supergirl and John Kent Superman. Next up is Superboy Prime with his similarly bulky silver boots. Unlike Steel though, and at least he got his leg hoses. As for other Superman villains, and here we have Lex Luthor, Bizarro, Injustice 2 Brainiac, General Zod, also with some big clunky silver boots, the Atomic Skull, and then move into some larger Superman villains, and here we have Lobo, and then for the really big ones, we've got Calabac, Mongol, the ruler of Warworld, and Doomsday. Of course, for the comparisons I'm sure you're the most excited to see, and here's Superman himself. This one's the DC Direct Through the Ages box set John Byrne version. Next up is NECA, but making the move to McFarlane, and here we have Action Comics 1000. Hush, who despite not being in a suit of armor is still somehow bigger and bulkier than the guy who is, but that's nothing compared to the girth of the Return of Superman. Swing into the other extreme though, and here we have classic Superman wearing the Doomsday 2-pack trunks. While not the black costume he wore in the Return of Superman comic, here we have the Solar Suit version, but for one comparison I've been very curious about, and here we have Superman Unchained. For another 7-inch scale, hammer-wielding hero with a red cape, and here we have the Marvel Select Thor. Mine's bigger. Oh, believe me, I know. For a relative scale comparison, here's Steel with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man. And as always, here he is with Stealth Iron Man. Rhodey? Is that you? As someone in a suit of armor, I just don't think that Steel should be lankier than Superman. And there are some missed opportunities for accessories, but for playability, I'm giving Steel 4 points. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. Depending on where you get him, Steel's going to set you back between $20 to $23, and he joins Superboy, Solar Suit Superman, and especially Eradicator as figures that are kinda close to the Reign of Supermen, but just off enough to be frustrating. Hopefully we'll get the more traditional versions of these characters somewhere down the line. In the meantime, if all you want is a Steel figure, this is still a pretty good one. Just maybe wait till you can find him in stores so you can check out the paint apps for yourself. For price, I'm giving Steel 4 points, averaging out to a grand total of 4 out of 5. The real question is, should I try to fix the paint job on this one, or should I leave him as is to use for funny gags in the future? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.